Welcome to this session on this CSS3 course. Today we are going to be looking at the display positioning and floats, basically how we can position our elements. I've made some changes to this file. I've taken out the stuffs there, sorry, and I've added this element here. So let me just cut this. I don't want it to be in the head. What I can do is to, okay, it's fine. So I can come over here and then target the elements, the parent, and then we can style it, give it a width of 50%, set the margin to auto, and then give it a height of let's say 250 pixels. Basically I don't need much styling, I just need this to be, let's set it to 250 as well, and then give it a background. Of red. So when we save that, we have it there. And then we also come over here and style the child. The child, we are going to give it a width of 50 pixels and then height of 50 pixels as well, and then give it a background of yellow, so it's obvious. And then I think that's what we have there. So the first thing we want to look at is positioning elements. I don't think we need that. So how we can position elements. Let's say, for example, there are three kinds of, there are four in number. Okay, I'll just consider four for the static. You have fixed. The element can also be relative, and then absolute. So by default, every element has the positioning is absolute, is static, sorry. The positioning of every element is static. So what we can do is that we can come over to this parent, we can set the position, you can set the position, set it to fixed. So when we do that and then we reload, you see that the element is as if it's taken away from the flow of the page. It's as if it's no longer part of the page. And when we scroll, okay, we don't have anything to scroll on. So let me copy this article stuff, copy it. I want us to be able to scroll. So that's basically what I'm going to do. So now when we scroll, as we are scrolling, you can see that the content there is fixed, it's not moving. So with this we can now define, we can move the content, define where we want it to be. Let's say we say top to be 50 pixels. So you can see that when the element is fixed 50 pixels from to the top of where it's normally used to be. So I can also say right, I can say right, that I'm specifying where I want it to be, 30 pixels. So whatever coordinate I've defined, when I refresh, is going to move to that place. So that's where it will be fixed. So as I scroll, the content is no longer there, is taken out of the flow of the page and is fixed on that location. This is what you may want to do to, let's say for example, in the page that we had, that details page, you may want to put that details to the to be fixed on a particular corner. So that is how we can specify. So we can also set, apart from top and that, we can also set the bottom. We can say, let's say we want it to be fixed to the bottom. Sorry, you can say bottom 30 pixels. You can say left, just some coordinates that you want it to occupy. Left 20 pixels. So this will be 20 pixels from the left. So you can see 20 pixels from the left and then 30 pixels from the bottom, and the element will be fixed there. So that's the when the position is set to fixed. So when the position is set to relative, so let's set the position to relative. Okay, let's return the the element to default. So the element is back to the default way, the way we put it. So now let me set the position to relative. So when I set this position to relative, you can see that the position, although the position has been set to relative, is not out of the page. Everything still looks the way it's supposed to be. So I can now define where the element goes using this top, right, bottom, and all these attributes, all these key values. They are applicable to the same way I used it in fixed, the same way it's applicable in relative and absolute. So I can specify where the element moves to. So this is going to, you see where the element is occupying. This is going to move the element 50 pixels to the top and then 30 pixels from the right. So it's going to take up that space. So you can see that it has moved the element. Okay, I said okay, top 50 pixels from the away from the okay, 50 pixels top, and then right 30 pixels. So that's where it has shifted the element. So if I take this out and save, the element is back to the default, and then I choose bottom. Now this is going to move the element 30 pixels from the bottom. I think that's the way I'm put. Sorry, 30 pixels to the bottom and then 20 pixels to the left. So that's what is going to happen. So it's not 30 pixels from the bottom of the page itself, just it's going to shift it according to your specifications, the specification you've specified. So let me put this to be right, or let me comment this so that we see it move. So I've set it to relative, but in this regard, what is not right here? Okay, I think that is what is not right. So I've set it's going to move 30 pixels to the right and then 30 pixels to the bottom. So just a kind of adjustment there. So when we save and reload, we see 30 pixels to the right, okay, and then 30 pixels to the bottom. Okay, that's the direction it's going to follow. So that's how we can specify our positioning. Another positioning we can make is to set the position to be absolute. So in this case, the element is going to move within its parent. The positioning is going to be with relative to its parent. So that basically means that we'll position an element absolutely inside a relatively positioned element. So for example, I position this parent to set the position to relative. So I can come over here for this one because it's inside a, sorry, I'm saying parent, position. I can set it to absolute. Okay, and then set the top. So now that I've set it to absolute, so let's save, and then when we reload, you see that the element is the default there. So I can say that right, I can specify the coordinate right 30 pixels to the right, and I save. So you can see that the element has moved 30 pixels, giving 30 pixels to the right. So this is a nice, you can use this to produce a lot of banners and cards and all the rest of them. So the element is now 30 pixels from the right. So I can also say top, maybe to put a space there, 20 pixels, top 20 pixels. So that's going to give a 20 pixels from the top. I think from the top, yes, that's correct. So the next, okay, I can also say bottom and left. Let's copy that and come over here. So 30 pixels left, so that's as positioned that element there. So this is how we can position element absolutely. So the element is the coordinate is relative to the containing element. So that's how we can position elements, the various ways we can position our elements. So the next thing I've hit Control X. So the next thing I will talk about is about the display styles. So for example, everything is back to default. Let's say there are basically, we have this display that we've really not used. We can set displays to, elements can be displayed as inline, they can be displayed as block, they can be displayed as none, that's to hide the element, you set it to none. You can display it as inline. Then there are other ones which will not really get into, such like flexbox, flex, and grid. So basically we talk about inline, block, and so let me talk about elements can be displayed as inline or block. For example, an inline element will just take up as much space that it needs and then leave room for others to also come in. For example, you look at these anchor tags here, these links that are displayed here. Let's find it. So you see that each link is just taking up as much space that it needs, allowing others to line up. So this is their default way of displaying without applying any style. You can see that of all the styles that I've applied to this document, none applies to the anchor tags. So this is just their way of specifying. So if I add another element there, it's just going to take up that space again. So if I add another element and I have to connect, so you can see it's going to take up another space, leaving others to line up. Now let's say I have a paragraph. Let's come over here and put a paragraph. Say this is a para 1, just to demonstrate, and then I set another para 2. Even though, see, you can see each of them takes up a different line, so even though there's still room, I think what I need to do is to style this up a bit. So let me give this a class of 1. Okay, b1. Sorry guys, a class of p1, and then give this a class of p2. So we can come over here and style p1 and p2. So I have p1, give it a background red. Let's just take up background of red, color of white, give p2. What are we doing? We are selecting the class, so we use period, select it, period p2, and then give it a background of yellow, and then a color of black. I think that will work. So you see the style is up, so you can see that the space that this paragraph has taken up is up to the end. So this one takes up to the end. So those are the spaces that they take up. So this kind of blocks off this paragraph, kind of blocks off the whole, takes up the full width of the area. So even when you expand this, it will keep taking up the full width of the containing elements. So that's kind of block elements, and then the anchor tags are a kind of inline element. So there are several examples of it. You see that this div, the divs that I've defined here, they are basically, the div are block line elements, and the div are block line element. Basically, the elements you are going to see in the block line level, just list it. So block level, you are going to have the section, the article, they are all block. You have div, you have a paragraph, and then and so on and so forth. Then for inline elements, you are going to have the anchor tags, you have span, and so on and so forth. So these are the various elements we can find in that category. So there are several examples of it, but as we continue, you will keep pointing out a number of them. So even the, what do they call it, the unordered list is also block. Just there's so many of them. Unordered list is also a block level element, just like we've seen here. That's by default. So let me open this. There's something we once saw in the previous. It's not opening. Slow. I want to show you from the dev tools. Wow. The recorder is kind of slowing down my system. So you can see that by default, this is user agent style sheet. That's where the style is coming from. The body is display set to block. So you can see the article. I want to pick out the article. There's something we saw about it the other time. So you can see the article by default is the display set to block. So these are the default settings that they come with, but we can also change that using the display property. So for example, for that anchor tags, I can as well say every anchor tag in my document, I want to set the display to block. So this will cause them to, so let me set their background so that it's easier to read. Background and color, that's what I want to take up, so that we can see their text. So for now that they have their default behavior, so that's the default behavior there. So let's refresh. So this is their default behavior. You can see that they only take up as much space as they require. Now when I set them to block, so this is what I have. So you can see each of them takes up a separate line, and they have taken up the full width of their containing elements. So that's how we can override the default properties of elements. So I can also set this article by default. You can see all the anchor tags I have, they are taking on a new space, taking on a separate space for themselves. So also I can also override this p1, which by default, where is it? By default is set to block. I can also override this and set the display property to inline, so you can see that this one has taken up just the space that it needs. In this case now, if I put anything, if I go to the document and I put anything, let's say span, of course if you put a block level element, it will force itself to the, this is after para 1. So when we save, you can see they are behaving as inline. I've overridden the style of this to become an inline. So that's how we can override that. Another thing we can do is we can also use this to hide the visibility. So I want to use this, yes, I want to use this to illustrate that. So I can set the visibility, the display to none. Now when I do that and save, that's going to hide that that paragraph is gone. It's no longer there. This is coming from the span. So the paragraph is gone, and then it's taken out of the page entirely. So this is one way to do it. Now I can also set the visibility. There's also this visibility, and then set it to hidden. So you can see that. So if I set this to hidden, so let me restore it to the original so that we see the effect. So that's the paragraph there. Now I'm setting the visibility to hidden. So let's set it to hidden and see what happens when we save and then reload. You see that the paragraph is no longer there, but although the paragraph is no longer there, this space is reserved, so that if I uncomment this, you see it comes out without affecting the other, rearranging the page. So but if I set the display here, let's say by default this thing is disconnected. So if I set that display, if I reload, the paragraph comes up. Now when I set the display to none, when I set the display to none, notice that is save and refresh, is taken out of the flow of the page, so the document have to rearrange to take up that space. That's the difference between using visibility to hide an element and using display to hide it. So when I take that out and then save and refresh, you see the document will rearrange itself, yes, to show that up. So that's how we can hide or display elements. The next up is how we can also float elements. I think I'll need to pause the video to create a markup that we can use to illustrate it, to so that the video doesn't get too long. So okay, so I've created two divs, left and right, inside this parent element, and then on the CSS I've given this parent background and taken out the width, so it's taking up the full width. So I can come over here and style those elements. I can say the left, let's say the left, I can select them as a group because I want two of them to be the same size. So I can specify their width. I can say the width to be 80 pixels and then the height to be 80 pixels, and then give them a background. I basically want each of them to have a separate background, so I can say left, this is why I target them specifically, give it a background of yellow, and then give this one with an attribute of right a background of green. So when I save, so you see that the elements are laid out that way. So the next thing I want to do is that I can choose to use apply float just to describe how I want them to be displayed, and then I can say float to, okay, let this one float to left, so, and then this one floats to right. So when we save and then refresh, we see that this is floated to the left and then this is floated to the right. So that's how we can use that float to arrange elements. Also, sometimes after floating the elements, there may be some issues to be resolved. Let's say we have we may need to clear the float. So for example, sometimes after floating the elements to left and right, you see that the page is disconnected. It's like the arrangement of the, so let's refresh this. So you see some elements coming up, popping up like that. So the way we do that is we have this clear fix. So what we can do is, we are really running low on time, so we can create a class, maybe call it clear fix, and then use the after studio elements content. We don't want anything to be in the content, and then we can say they set the display to block, and then set the clear. So we have this clear property. You can set it to left to clear, floating to the left, and then to right to clear that to the right, both. So, and then at the end we can apply this clear fix to the attribute, to the parents. Let's say you can see that this is inside this inside the parent div. So at the end we want to clear it, what we can do is that we can come here and create an empty div, put a class of clear fix, and that our class will be applied there. It will be applied to that document. Also, although this will mean that you'll be creating empty this thing, you can also add that clear fix class here. So this basically also shows that elements can have more than two classes separated by space. So two of them will have that class and it will be applied there. We are going to apply all the things that we've discussed in this series, CSS series, to rearrange the document that we started in our HTML5 to make it look nice, so that you get to see all these features. So that's how we can use floats to rearrange elements on our web page. So we've basically gone through the positioning and the floating. We are really not running, the time is really out of hand. So when we come back next time, we are basically going to be talking about typographies, font, background, text, and all the rest of them. We'll put everything together and crush them, and then we move down to media queries. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like this, please subscribe, and then also give it a thumbs up, and then ask your questions in the platform or in the comment section. Thank you so much.